Hey everyone, big news out of Cuba this week. Check it out after this. We're going to be talking about the embargo of Cuba by the United States that's been going around for a while. So if you like what I'm doing here, please like and subscribe below, but we'll jump right into it right now. As you may or may not know, the United States has had an embargo on Cuba since the 50s, since the Kennedy administration, and it obviously has had ramifications on that country and ours ever since. Basically, the meant was that we would not sell any products to Cuba and we would not let citizens travel there. Some of those restrictions were lifted during President Obama's administration. Some of the travel restrictions were lifted. But still the full embargo, which was set out by Congress, is what is still in place. And let's check out what's been going on there. It seems like there's some protests happening. So it looks like it's a general protest of the embargo. The sign said "Down with the embargo." For those that don't know Spanish, the one that they showed in the sign. Basically, the embargo by Cuba by the United States. The main reason was because they became a communist state back during the Cold War. And the thought process was that the United States, by embargoing it, would drive Cuba back to not being a communist state. Clearly that hasn't happened because they still are a communist state, and there's still nothing has really changed in regards to if they're going to be one or not. Fidel Castro, who was the original leader in Cuba, has even died, and his brother has taken over, and it still hasn't really changed the politics there. Let's check out a little bit more of this protest. I want to point out, as you can see, because of the embargo, they don't have American cars. So they're driving a lot of the old, either cars made by the United States prior to the embargo happening and were imported, or as you can see, some old German cars, the old Volkswagen Bugs that were made during the 50s as well. So there has been some economic toll on Cuba because of this. It does limit their ability to export goods, especially to the United States, which is a major economy that would obviously want some of the things that they make there. And being so close to the United States for such a small country really has prevented their economic prosperity. So let's continue to watch. We have reopened the Cuban embassy. There was that weird illness that was happening a few years ago. They never really did find out how that was happening or what was going on. But we do have diplomatic ties now. For a long time, we wouldn't even talk to them. And you can even see they are taking the COVID pandemic seriously, even through this March. You can see, for the most part, they're pretty spaced out. They're all wearing masks, so they are still taking it seriously. As a matter of fact, they have universal health care, something that the United States doesn't even have. This is a video from Bloomberg News about the protest, it looked like mainly in Havana, but probably across the country, to the U.S. embargo of their country, Cuba. And as you can see, there is pretty widespread. It does have a big impact on their economy and their just general welfare. The original purpose of it was because they were a communist state and in the orbit of the Soviet Union, that we wanted to punish them or drive them out away from the Soviet Union, make it painful enough for them to say, hey, let's not be communist anymore. We'll join the United States inside. Well, clearly that didn't work. It's been, I think it's been close to 60 years now, 70 years now that the embargo has been in place. It's time to end it. President Obama was trying to move in that direction. President Biden is amicable to that situation too, but it is going to take an act of Congress. The biggest issue is that there's still a lot of refugees, and they're not really refugees, but they've emigrated from Cuba. They escaped Cuba to Florida, and the Republicans there, and generally the older school Cubans there, are really against any lightening of the load against Cuba. They want to continue to punish Cuba, even though there hasn't really been any evidence that it has actually done anything other than just to keep the people poor in Cuba. The Cuban people haven't risen up against their government. There hasn't been any hint that they intend to change what their government is. So the embargo clearly hasn't worked, and it's time to end it because it's pointless. And we should have wide open the ability to visit Cuba, the ability to do business with Cuba. There's a lot of stuff that just needs to end at this point. So the Cuban embargo was a failed policy that has been handed down through generations, and it's time for it to end. So I know there wasn't a lot of audio in that video. It was more of just the protests themselves. But hopefully I was able to add a little bit of context as to what was going on in Cuba with the United States relations, and is able to figure out why we're still doing that, even though it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. If I did, please like the video below. And in the comments, tell me if the embargo was lifted in Cuba, would you travel there? And what would be the first thing you want to see in Cuba? But until I see you around the internet, you have a great night. Bye.